Hello and welcome to today's video. This is Martin from martinmixing.com, and today we will be doing part 2 of our live mixing series focusing on the bass guitar. Let's do it. Okay, so in the last episode we did the drums. I think we achieved really cool results. I think we covered a lot of different techniques that you can use when mixing drums. We did parallel distortion, parallel compression, 3 different ways. We did some serial compression, bus compression, all that sorts of stuff. And I'm quite happy with the results, to be honest. As I mentioned, we went a bit more extreme than what I would usually do, but you know, for the sake of this demonstration, I think we can stick to this. And today we want to fit the bass into the drums, or make the bass work with the drums. Now in metal, usually what happens is that we keep the kick drum a bit tighter. We keep the kick drum nice and tight, so it doesn't have too many subs, it doesn't sustain for ages, so it has a really tight attack and a really punchy sound. And then we use the bass guitar to fill in the lower octave from, like, say 40 to 100 hertz. And of course we want a bit more grit from the bass as well, in the mix as a whole, that is. Now in this song in particular, of course the drums are quite fast, so I didn't want them to sustain for long. I wanted especially the double kick hits, to be really nice and tight and really nice and punchy. And then with the bass we'll fill up these lower lows and add kind of a sense of grit in the mid-range as well. So let's have a look at the bass just as it is right now. Okay, I mean the bass sounds really good. It is a very even sound. The lows, just as we checked on the meter here on the EQ, are really tight and really consistent, so you won't have to do a lot of crazy stuff. I'll probably not use any multiband compression. Now I mentioned in the very beginning that I want to do as much as possible with the Ssl Channel Strips, so I'm going to load one instance of that just to have it in place. Use this, but I also, well, let's just see how far we can go and what we can do. So as it is, I think this would be already a really cool sound. As you can see, we just boost a little bit of these higher mid-range to get a bit more grit. There was a little bit of something around 250 which I didn't like. We reduced that with a quite narrow EQ. And then a bit of boost around 66.9. No, let's make it 66.6. Can we do that? No, never mind. Just an insider Satanist joke. I'm gonna edit that out. And then we have about 6 dB of relatively fast compression, 4:1 ratio. I mean, it is constantly on, as you can see. And it's quite a spanky sound, I would say. I tried with the compressor or the EQ going into the compressor or before it. Let me just demonstrate a different approach here as well. Here we can see a bit more of what's going on. So let's just loop a section. So let's say if I was to use multiple separate plugins actually, then, okay, what I would do is then I would use a digital EQ. If I wasn't limited by the challenge of using just this one plugin, then I would use a digital EQ. To get rid of this muddy mid-range. Just for good measure, I would put a really tight low cut at around 20. That's already quite tight. Then I would run in through an SSL channel emulation. Doesn't do much, but you know, a little bit of something. And now with bass, what I like to do my corrective EQ before compression. So I've applied my corrective EQ, okay, I've reduced what I didn't want because I don't want this to affect my compression later on. And then I will apply my compressor. So I'm actually quite curious myself. Let's see what happens if we use 1176. So we get a little bit more of the low end, just a bit more consistency there. When I compress a bit more, I can hear the timing of the bass becoming messed up. I don't like how the attack and the release are messing around with how the bass feels. So, I mean, realistically, we don't need that much compression here, but I want to try to see if we can improve this, if we can make it more consistent. And I quite like this relatively subtle setting, but let's try a different one, an LA2A. Now the LA2A has more body, and I like this a lot more compared to the 1176. So let's just try one more. I don't like any of these here. But what we can do is we can turn off the EQ here and just use the compressor of this. Okay, I clearly prefer this. It has a bit more of a thud, it has a bit more attack kind of sound going on. The LA2A still keeps it a bit flabby. I don't quite like that. So let's just use the BX console. However, there's one more thing I want to try. So by now we have corrective EQ here, okay? we have the compression from this. No EQ, EQ is off. We can even turn off the expander. Realistically, we don't need it. There we go. And then from here, I will use, we don't need that. We have enough analog emulation from here. What I do want to use, however, is the Neve EQ, because the Neve EQ is just a really cool EQ to boost exactly these two frequencies on bass in particular. I quite like this, but I want to try a different version as well, where instead of adding an upper harmonic to the 1.6, we add a lower. So let's try the 800. Okay, so let's see which works better with the kit. So I prefer the 800, that's for sure, but I hear a little bit of something that is now being boosted as well that I don't like. Cool, I quite like that. So I would stick with this, I would say, but let's just see what happens if we have some parallel fun as well. And for that, I have this parallel bass set up. However, I'm gonna tweak this a little bit just to have a bit more fun. Let's see what we have here by default. Okay, this is quite intense. So this adds kind of a harmonic, not a harmonic, but a nice boost with some exciter kind of stuff in the lows. And I don't dislike it, it's quite heavy. It's pretty cool. Let's see what else we have here. Okay, that's cool. I quite like that, but I also think we can add a bit more distortion to it. So let's see. I really like the clip distortion. Doesn't quite work, to be honest, so I don't like any of this. When it's actually mixed in, I don't like any of this. I don't like the filter, I don't like that, I don't like that. I do think we have enough low end from the original alone, to be honest. So let's try to do something with distortion instead. Let's try this one. So there's a particular kind of sound that I'm looking for, which is kind of a scratchy, lower mid-range, bit of upper mid-range kind of tone. As you can see, I'm EQing into the distortion to shape the sound of how this reacts. And this more or less does what I want. I quite dig this actually. Let's... I really dig this. When I record bass guitar in this kind of genre, in heavier genres, I usually use full tone OCD as a distortion because it just does something really, really cool. And what I do is I record 3 different lines. So I record the clean DI, actually 4. I record the clean DI, I record the mic'd up amplifier, and then I record a distorted DI, which is then 3, not 4, 3. Except if the bass amp has a tweeter, then I put a 57 on the tweeter as well. For the cone, for the actual cone on a bass amp, I usually use an AKG D112. It's one of the best bass guitar mics you can get, in my opinion. Now, because this send is pre-fader, what happens is that this parallel tone will stay consistent. However, when I change the volume of my bass, the volume of the distortion will not change. So I will create a track and I will send both of them into a bass subgroup. And this way I have complete control over my bass. Now, if I wanted to go a bit heavier on the processing, what I could do, let's try this CL1B, which I really like. And you know, guys, this is a prime example now why you shouldn't just trust the attack and release times and these meters and everything. Look at what happens, just even though I'm not changing the threshold, look at what happens with the compression when I change the release time. This means 2 things. We cannot trust the meters. Especially not VU meters. They show something completely different than what happens internally. Why? Because it is not fast enough to catch up with the internal electronics, okay? So if I have a fast setting, I might actually have a lot more compression than what this is able to show, but it's happening so fast below the 100 millisecond mark that the meter cannot keep up. And why is this? Because a VU meter has ballistics of 100 millisecond attack and release, which means a VU meter will take 100 milliseconds to react to whatever is going in, which means if you have a fast transient, like on a kick and a snare, it cannot keep up with them. It cannot go up and down fast enough, which is why it's really good, because it shows more or less 100 millisecond average of what you're hearing level-wise, which is why it was invented in the first place, to give you an idea of what the loudness of what the perceived loudness is. Now, this is still old technology. It didn't quite work, yet it is still used because it's more accurate than full-scale digital meters in terms of what we hear. However, in terms of loudness, it is still not as good as a fully integrated loudness unit meter, for which you have to do a measurement across your whole song, of course. But I digress. So just, it's crazy. Look at what happens here. Faster attack, more compression. That actually makes a lot of sense. Just by changing the attack and the release, I have gotten a lot more compression. You can hear it by the volume drop as well. And very little with the attack and release set to slow versus fast. So Now this is quite thunderous. It has brought up a lot of the really, really deep subs. I mean, this is now just compression for compression's sake, to be honest. I don't even think we need it, but still it's a good experience, a good experiment to make, and you know, we have definitely learned and experienced some things just by doing this. I'll keep this on for now, just for why not. So this is pretty cool. One cool trick that I can also show you is, and that I see many people doing when mixing metal, is sending the bass into the drum bus as well. And that makes a lot of sense in my opinion, because in my opinion, the drums and the bass are one unit. They are the essence of the rhythm section, the backbone of most songs. So it makes sense to kind of try to glue them together. But of course, I don't want the bass to destroy now what we have carefully carved out for the drums, and vice versa. So let's just see what happens when we do this. Especially I want to check my compression here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to, does that work? Yes, let's duplicate this. Here we go. And this will not go into the bus, and this will go to the bus. And then we will solo save all of these. There we go. And there we go. Okay, of course, the drum bus is reduced by 9.6, so we have to make this 9.6 quieter. Let's try this. So what I really quite like is that the bass is below the level of the kick, so the bass is actually not triggering my bus compressor on the drum kit, which is really cool. Yet we can hear that, of course, the gain reduction, because you know the gain reduction is essentially a volume fader across whatever you put in it. So the gain reduction still gets applied to the bass as well, and I can hear that it sounds a bit more glued in terms that it plays more with the rhythm of the whole kit, because now what happens is that the bass actually ducks a little bit every time the kick hits. So they seem more together, you know. Now, of course, there's a slight tonal change as well because of this bus processing and this EQ, but it's barely noticeable. We get a bit more distortion here, but it's also not really noticeable. We can try to see what kind of tonal change we have. There you go. Very little, I mean, barely noticeable, to be honest. I think because we are boosting more of the treble here, it's more, and it doesn't have that much, and it's at 10K, it's more noticeable on the overheads, to be honest. So, yeah, I quite like this version. I don't, normal one that is not going into the drum bus seems a little bit detached for me, so I'll stick to using this version. So let's get rid of this altogether, and here we go. Of course, always checking my levels, and this is where I want to mention that, as you can see, you can kind of see me gain staging and kind of not really see me gain staging. And why is this? Because you cannot possibly expect a mixer to sit down, unless you're Michael Brauer, of course, and you have a highly complex mixing system, but you cannot sit down and go through, okay, in this case 11, but I just did a mix with, what was it, 86 tracks. I'm not going to go through every track and see if they hit exactly like whatever imaginary number that any other YouTuber is giving you, -6 or 10 or whatever FS, because it makes no sense. It makes absolutely no sense to do it. It's a waste of time. It completely goes against the logic and the circular nature of mixing. There is no recipe to mixing. There is no, like, I love baking bread. I'm making a loaf upstairs right now, okay? I love making it, and there it makes sense. There are steps involved, and there are, you know, you cannot go back once you have kneaded the loaf. You cannot go back and add more flour, but in mixing you can go back. You can say, okay, I want to change this, I want to change that. I don't like the level here. So mixing is a very circular thing. Now I have adjusted the bass, but now I can already hear that I'll have to tweak the drums again in the next video, okay? I can hear that the overheads are a bit thin. I don't like that. I'm not getting enough body from the pressures, you know? So in the next video, or probably after I've done the guitar in a video 4, we will address the mix as a whole. And the same goes to gain stage. You can see how I tweak the levels as I go. Like, is this too cold? Okay, then I'll pump the gain here or there. And I have a million different points in where I can do it, okay? Even if I just use one plugin on the bass, look, there's an input gain here, there's an output gain there. I can, you know, I can send more signal into the plugin or have less signal coming out of the plugin, whatever I want. I can now use this group fader here to reduce the volume if I think it's too much going into the bus. I can use the volume faders here to adjust the gain. So it makes no sense in going through everything track by track. If something is too hot, yes, okay, cool, let's say the kick is too hot. I notice that it's clipping too much, and I'm boosting, it's clipping, okay, reduce the input gain. There you go. I mean, it's not that complicated, you know. You will see how your plugins react and you'll get used to it. You know that if you have something with a fixed threshold like an 1176, okay, as you can see, you are here actually gain staging. You are pushing your signal into the fixed threshold of this compressor, and then you are compensating with the output gain. Is it the best way of doing it? No, I much prefer compressors with a threshold knob, but you know, this is how this was designed and it's awesome and it works. And same for everything else, you know, if you get a track like, for instance, the hi-hat, which is very low in volume, and if I was struggling getting the right level for this track just by using the volume fader, or if I wanted to compress it and I couldn't get enough compression because the level is not enough, then I would just boost the input gain here and be done with it. And that's the gain staging, okay? So yes, I do gain stage because I do check the levels of my tracks as I am mixing them, but it's not a separate step that I do when I mix, you know? I will get to every track eventually. I will make adjustments to every track in the mix, and I adjust them as they come, okay? And a poet, I think a poet friend of mine said, and he was quoting or paraphrasing an older, more famous poet in his country who said that you have to know the rules to do something good. So when you start out, you should stick to the rules and practice and get to know the rules and stay within the rules. But then once you get sophisticated enough, the art comes from knowing when and how to break those rules. And that's why, you know, many people don't appreciate many newcomer musicians or many newcomer artists, because they start by breaking the rules without having shown previously that they can stick to the rules, that they can create something within a given framework, and then, you know, accumulating some credit and then do something to break the rules. Yeah, personally, I don't like musicians who come out and become famous by doing a cover. So it's like, what have you put down, you know? Can you even compose? Can you come up with your own song? I mean, God knows how many people have worked on this song that you have just come out with, and now you are famous with it, you know, and it's in radio. I'm talking about a particular song, but I'm not going to tell you which one it is. Yeah, so what have you done before? You know, I can Google your name and there's absolutely nothing. You have done this song, the labels have made some money, you probably made some money as well, but what's next? You know, you can't, you know, can you compose? Can you do your own song? Please show me. I don't think you can, you know. You have never done anything previously, you have come up with this cover, or someone, you know, put you into this position of singing on this cover, and it's on radio here and there, and okay. But, you know, for me, this is zero, absolutely nothing, you know, so yeah, good luck in the future, dear lady or gentleman. Yeah, so this is my little rant about that. So yeah, learn to mix within the framework, learn the rules, cool, but then you have to know when to get away from the rules, where you have to break them. I don't know if I was breaking any rules. Yes, of course, I'm clipping everything. Like I'm clipping the kick, I'm clipping the snare, and we are told in every mixing course that you should avoid clipping at all costs. I can maybe do in the next video an A/B. If I avoided all the clipping on the kick and snare, we would be overloading our master bus by like a 20 dB already. And you cannot get a loud mix then, because you know, you have a transient here, but the body of the mix is down here. So what are you going to do with this space, this 10 decibel space, you know? So yeah, you have to break the rules sometimes, but you have to know when, where, and how to do it tastefully. That's the most important thing. So we have mixed one track. We have mixed one track in this video, and it's already going for almost half an hour. I hope there's something to take away from it. I hope you see how I approach the bass. Now, I will do more of these live mixing videos. Hopefully in one video I will receive a bass without any processing on it. Of course, this one was already distorted. Maybe in another video I can show you how I would approach distortion if I was creating it from scratch. And yes, in the next video we will be doing the guitars, and then in video 4 we'll bring all of the mix together, and then I might do a video 5 where we just analyze and talk about everything that I have done. Oh, and there will be a video 6, which will probably be my favorite video, because there I will compare this mix that I am doing now without SonarWorks, and then at one point I'll turn SonarWorks on, and then I will hear if I have to make some tweaks or not. Now I'm really excited about that, because I really want to hear the before and after, and then I will send you 2 mixes to download, which will be the mixed version without SonarWorks and the mix with SonarWorks, with my adjustments after having applied SonarWorks room correction. I will level match them, and then I'm really curious about your comments. I'm really excited about doing that. So this is it for today's video. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe and like button, please. It helps me get more exposure. And also, please don't hesitate to join my Facebook group Mixing with Martin, where I have much more exclusive content, where you can reach out to me directly if you have any questions. I'll be seeing you in part 3 of this video. Until then, happy mixing, take it easy, bye-bye.